Okay, class, today I'm going to show you how to draw an eye. And I want you to use your sketchbook to do this. I want you to get some of your different pencils. I want you to have an H pencil and a 2B pencil at least. And then I want you to pull up an image of an eye, or you can use the idea sheet that I have shared with you, but you can also just go into Google, look up an eye, like close up picture of an eye. Some of them are going to be really, really close up, but a lot of them are just going to involve the basic shape of the eye because I want you to notice a couple things that we get to at one point. But I'm going to take you through the basic steps really quickly, and I want you to practice as much as possible when you're doing this. So have your sketchbook ready, have some of your pencils ready to go, and then we're going to just jump right into it. Okay? And the first step in drawing an eye is to draw a circle. And what we're thinking again is we're looking into the basic shapes. We're breaking something down into its basic shapes. And I want you to imagine the eyeball that is behind the eyelid. So, I'm going to draw it over here. I'm going to do very lightly. I'm holding my pencil very lightly. I'm using my H pencil. Okay. Whenever we're doing the early sketches, we're using our H pencil. And I'm just kind of going around in a circle. Okay, that's step one. Draw a circle. Step two is to draw another circle inside of that. So basically, you're thinking this is the eyeball, and then this is the pupil inside, the iris and pupil, right? I'm going really lightly. I barely want to see this on the paper. Okay, this is darker than what it should look like for you. I just want to make sure that you can see it. So I do that. So step two is to get the iris pupil shape in the inside. And this is a good ratio as to how big that is in relationship to the whole eyeball. The next part is to get the basic outline and shape of the eyelids. And that's more shaped like a football. And the football, the eyelids will have to go across the top and the bottom of your iris, because if you look at somebody and they're looking at you and their eyes are open normally, you do not see white above the eyelid and below at the same time. If someone is looking up a little bit, or they have really wide eyelids, it's possible that white might be showing on the top or just the bottom. But generally speaking, if someone has their eyes at a normal resting point, you do not see the white of someone's eyes above and below the eyelid. So we're going to draw a football shape because that is the basic shape of someone's eyelids, okay? And I want it to go across the iris at the top and the bottom. I want it to go beyond the lines of my eyeball as well. So just outside. You see how I'm just outside the eyeball? So I want you to draw basically a football that takes you across the top of the iris, across the bottom of the iris, and beyond the eyeball. Okay? And now this is the part where we really have to look at what we're drawing. And what you do at this point depends on the shape of someone's eye. Everybody's eyeball, iris, pupil, everything is basically the same exact size in relationship to their head. People look like they have different size eyes or bigger eyes or smaller eyes based on the shape of their eyelids. So sometimes people have eyelids that curve really low down here, right? They go a little bit below, maybe even you see white below the iris. They curve really low. So that makes their eyes actually look larger. And they might have really thin eyelids that also make their eyeball, like shows more of their eyeball, which makes their eyes look larger. But in general, like I said, most people you don't see white on the above and below unless they're like really opening their eyes large. Everybody's eyelids kind of start and end at different places. So if we imagine that this was the inside of someone's eye and like their nose was over on this side, this would be the inside, this would be the outside. Some people's eyelids start lower and end higher. Some do the opposite. Some start a little bit higher and end a little bit lower. some are pretty even where they start here. And what I mean is, like, where does the shape of the eyelid begin? And let's imagine that this person has an eyelid that starts slightly lower, which is going to be the norm, I would say. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with a little bit darker, I'm going to look at the eye that I'm drawing, and I'm going to try to grab the contours of this. Right? I'm going to look closely at what I'm drawing, and I'm going to look and see that it looks like their eyelid starts lower. If I were to draw a line that goes straight through the middle, right, where our football kind of was. So if we, this is the middle of the eye. I'm looking to see where does it start. So imagine an imaginary line that goes through the eye, and I'm noticing that their eyelid starts a little bit lower and then kind of curves up pretty dramatically when it gets to the eyeball, comes up, has a nice curve over, and then has a slower slant down. And again, we're thinking back to our observational drawing where we're looking really closely at the way things move. Okay? And then I'm going to, if you notice, the bottom curves less intensely. So it just kind of comes a little bit straight out, a little bit down, and then it hits the eyeball and it has a subtle curve. Again, a nice smooth curve, and then comes up a little bit stronger, right? And it ends higher than where it started. Okay? So that's just getting the basic shape of the eyelid. Okay? And then if I want, I can come in and outline a little bit the edges of my iris just to kind of see that a little bit more clearly. Okay? So the next step in drawing the eye is to kind of finish off the eyelid. We have the bottom part of the eyelid, but what about the top ridge that kind of comes up? And again, this will be different on every person, but comes across. So this is the next step. Just add that top eyelid, okay? And then some of the bottom. And this is not going to be as prominent. So a lot of times we just have one thinner line and then maybe another line that kind of comes out under it, okay? And then we can kind of get to the step of adding some more details. So we can go a little bit, we can come in, put the pupil. We can darken some of these lines. We want to define maybe this a little bit better. Let's look a little closer and add a little bit more to these edges. You can start using your B pencil possibly to do this, right? So we're adding some details with our B pencil, okay? And then just kind of starting to put some elements in here, okay? Now, what I want to show you next is how to draw eyelashes. And eyelashes are something that people struggle with quite a bit. And the trick to eyelashes is, let's imagine that I'm doing an eyelash right here, okay? Like let's say I'm doing an eyelash along this line that I just made right here. What I'm going to do is, this is the trick. You want on the outside your lines to swoop in like this. And on this side, they swoop this way. Do you see that? And they're quick, okay? So you go, like kind of like this, very quickly, right? And I'm exaggerating it right now so that you can see that. And then when you get to the middle, they kind of straighten out. They go this way, right? And that's kind of how you do it. So again, this was exaggerated. And one of the things you can do too is with eyelids is, again, if this is the line of my eyelid, you can kind of do like scratchy lines like this. But you really want it to be quick and smooth, okay? And you don't want to have too much of them. I've had a lot of students they get like really, really, really super bushy eyelashes like this, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to look at where the eyelids are, and I'm using my B pencil at this point, and I'm just kind of like lightly drawing in some swoops where I see them. typically, and with this eye, the eyelashes reach to the edge of the eyelid there, the outer edge of the eyelid. Okay, they tend to get longer on this side than they are on this side. I went a little bit too long on this side, and I can come back and erase that, but I'm just like getting a feel for it. Okay, let me show you that with a darker pencil. So and a little bit shorter on that side. See that? And I can add more weight to these lines by just kind of drawing over them again, right? Tracing them. And again, we're kind of trying to get right off that edge. I'm using a darker pencil now. I've switched to my 4B pencil, okay? And then the trick on the lower end of the eyelid is that the eyelashes come outside. They don't go all the way into the eye socket as much. You don't see that. And they're further and fewer between. There's less of them, right? Generally speaking. Everybody has different eyelids, eyelashes, and all of that is different from person to person. Okay? And then here's an opportunity again to come in and start defining some of these edges. So I'm going to come back in and I'm going to look closely at my eye again, and I'm going to outline some of these elements. I'm going to get kind of that inner socket of the eye. I'm going to fix maybe some elements in my eye, right? So it looks a little bit more accurate. Okay. I'm going to add, darken in some other lines. Okay. And then let's get to shading the pupil. Okay. So with shading, as is often the case, you want your lines to go in and out. All right. So you want to shade in the direction that the elements of your shading involve. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to get a little closer. So the trick to shading the iris of the eye is that you want your lines to kind of go out. Think of a sun. And irises have a lot of different shapes, but this is the general idea. Again, you want your shading lines to kind of go in that direction. Okay? So when you shade like this. And you start very lightly with a light layer. Don't push down. Use your 2B pencil. Shade very lightly. Okay? But you want to do it in that direction. Then you can kind of come in and, darken around the edge of the inner pupil. And then typically, people have lines that kind of come out from different areas. So every once in a while, I'm going to go a little bit darker. I'm going to come in to the inside. It's usually darker on the inside. But I'm always shading in this direction, right? The trick to shading is having your lines move in a similar fashion as whatever it is that you're drawing. People tend to have darker edges around the sides of their pupils or their irises. And sometimes there's a shadow that falls over the top, right? Which continues into the white of the eyes, right? So then I'm going to grab a darker pencil. I'm going to come in, I'm going to darken my pupil more. I'm going to add some darker edges to these lines. I'm going to darken around here, right? I'm going to try to fill this out a little bit more potentially. And it's okay to exaggerate, especially in the beginning. I'm going to add some shading around the white of the eye into these areas. I'm going to, again, I can darken some of my eyelashes to pop out a little bit more. And I just want you to do some very basic sketches of eyes. So I want you to do one, and then I want you to start to do another one. Okay, and now I want you to go through that process again, but I want you to use a different eye that has a different shape to it. So again, we're going to start with doing, you know, the circle for the eyeball, right? The pupil in the middle, pupil iris, okay? With using your 2H pencil, the football shape, right? Just getting your basic sketch lines. This is very, very loose. Keep going over and over again. Just sitting there and practicing this could really just help you get a feel for drawing, okay? And now I'm looking at like another type of eye. And again, I want you to have that line that kind of goes through the middle. You know, imagining where does the eyelid start? Again, we have one that kind of starts lower, but the way that it swoops across is very different. It's very even. It starts down, has a very even line that kind of curves across and is very straight. It doesn't change direction abruptly, if you notice that. And it ends pretty high, right? It ends fairly well above my middle line, okay? And then I want to see where does that kind of come across? And I want to look at imagining where the pupil is in that middle line, right? And it kind of starts really low again, but it has a very strong movement upwards eventually. It kind of goes straight, a little bit down, and it has a strong movement up, right? And so I'm getting a feel for that. And then I can switch pencils, get a slightly darker pencil, and kind of emphasize that a little bit, look a little bit more closely, right? Kind of start to deal with a little bit of the inner part of the eye here. How does that meet? Where's the inside of the eyeball, right? We barely see it on the top. I can start to get a feel for the shape of my pupil in this one. I'm going to actually come inside a little bit, right? I'm still sketching, just going a little bit darker, put my pupil in there, right? So everybody's eye is shaped differently. Eyelashes are going to move differently. Some go up. In this case, you can actually see they kind of come down, right? But the same rule kind of applies, that you want to be quick with it, right? You want to get a feel for these edges, the lines, right? Kind of the outer shades. You want to start adding some shading with your maybe a 2B pencil where you see it, where it's really important. Just kind of give yourself a little bit of value to work with. And then you switch to a darker pencil and you really kind of start to define these elements, okay? Right? Just kind of working until you feel good about it. Try your hand at shading again. Again, shade in those directions, right? Maybe switch to a lighter pencil to give you a little bit of a background value there, right? Play with those eyelashes, kind of getting a feel for them. And it's just a process of building up layers like everything else is, right? There's very few eyelashes in this eye. And I just want you to practice doing that. I want you to draw at least 3 different types of eyes, okay, on your sketchbook. And fill the page, right? So I would do another one over here, potentially, okay? Fill that page, and then move to the next step. Really quick, before I let you go, I want to show you a little trick with shading the inside of the iris. A lot of times there's a glare that you can see in a person's eye. There's like white spots. So before you start getting this shading, it's a cool idea to kind of like add that in, okay? So like add the little glare that you see in a person's eye. Just like lightly draw it in, and then when you shade around that, right? Don't go into that area. You know, maybe I'm putting my lighter value down here, and I'm leaving this area, you know, pretty much untouched, my little glare. And then I can kind of come in with a darker one, darker pencil again, keeping my shading, moving with the eye, but I'm not going into this area. And then when I bring my darker values around the edge here, right, just kind of layering my shading, right, I leave that area untouched, right, and it kind of leaves that nice light glare in there. Just a little technique idea to try with your own drawings.